Okay, everyone. I am going to create, I hope this won't be too long. But I do want to really give you some insights into lesson planning, so that using this week's reading, which has a lot to do with curriculum and lesson planning, and beginning your first official start to lesson plan submission for your hat assignment. I want to go over first the hat so that you know where you're headed. And then I'm going to go over basically, how I want you to try to write these lesson plans up and submit them. So it'll be in two parts. I hope that's going to be okay. It will make it a little longer, but I think it's important for you to see the whole picture. And if I were in class with you in person, this would be so much easier. Okay. But I'll do my best, okay? So, writing lesson plans is so different in every setting. Some of you are in settings where they're provided for you and you're just implementing them. Some of them you're writing and submitting them to a director or a principal. And some of you may be in situations where you're not responsible for writing lesson plans. You just have like a weekly plan where you list your activities with the kids for the week. Good for you if that's the case, because that's actually better for the kids. But we all know the world we live in is a lesson plan world. So, and in terms of serving specific children with modifications and needs, they actually become part of the documentation of that. So it's really important to understand how these processes work. So what you're being asked to do is closer to a lesson plan that would be more, I guess I would say, kind of structured and standardized a little bit. But I'm going to give you some ways to create wiggle room so we can keep this early childhood friendly. All right, so the assignment description is here. Again, this is a university assignment. It's not an assignment I wrote, and it is not an assignment that I can change. It's part of your hat process in terms of your certifications. So I'm basically implementing a lesson plan, which you might be doing in your job. So I'll do the very best I can here. You've already created, like it says here, unit of study. I've called them topic proposals so that you can really think about them a little differently. And just think about something your children either need to know or want to know. So some of you are doing things that are need to know, and some of you have chosen things that the kids that you've observed have an interest in. So we have everything from creating a play to dinosaurs to trees. It's just wonderful. I love all of your things. I'll probably create a Padlet soon that lets you all share those, because that will serve as, for you as a future teacher or current teacher, as a list of things that you might also want to use. So you can see things in the criteria. You'll notice that there are various pieces in the lesson plan that are identified here in terms of points. So I want you to pay close attention to those. I'm going to go through them a little bit here, and then we can keep having dialogue about it. And I wanted to emphasize what I say in the assignment text, and that is that I don't see this as an end, it's a beginning. We're going to have a conversation if we need to. If not, great. If you're used to writing these and this is a breeze for you, or you're in a classroom already and you've already created these, this will be a really easy assignment for you. But if not, I just want to make sure you know whatever you turn in, we will work with. So I won't do your final score till later in the semester. Right now, I'm just going to give you a 1 if you submit something that we work on. If you submit something that's done, we'll save that for later when I create your grade for the entire hat. So if you have questions about that, just email me. That's no problem. So this is really important that these are developmentally appropriate. You may be working in a school system where the goals and objectives are really not appropriate. So I may do some switching around of that just so I make sure you know how to write a developmentally appropriate goal, even if you're not in that setting. And I will work with you on that. So no worries there. That's through no fault of yours. If you work somewhere where they're asking kids to do things that they're too young to do, it's just good for you to know that. And you probably already do know that because the kids will usually show us. Anyway, learning targets connected to one or more of early learning standards. So those come from the state of Kentucky. Student grouping is appropriate for the activity. Remember your complementary curriculum approach and really consider whether this particular lesson would be better done in, one-on-one, or is it going to be better in a small group, that type of thing. There are very few things that should be done in large groups. So if you're going to do a large group lesson plan, you're really going to have to defend it to me. I will just be honest. We know that large group activities really are not the best way for young children to absorb. They're more, when does this group need to come together as a whole? And that needs to really be thought through carefully. Formative assessments. I'm not sure how many of you have had any kind of training or background in that, so I will talk a little bit about that when I show you the lesson plan example. This should be described, procedures should be described so that if I were a substitute, I could read this and know pretty much what to do. That's your standard for writing that up. You're going to need to include accommodations and modifications. So when you describe your demographic in the lesson plan, be sure you've taken each description of different areas that children need support on in the rationale and demographic description, and identify modifications specifically for those. I will look for those, because if we list that we have 2 kids with autism and 1 child with cerebral palsy, say, then I want to see in the modifications section of the lesson plan how those children are being included. My expectation is that they will be included. And again, that's in your chapter this week. So I hope that chapter will be really helpful for you. Appropriate teaching strategies. Basically, you can go to complementary curriculum approach and see those. If you want to know what I'm looking for, super easy. Just look at them there. Activity is developmentally appropriate and high quality. High quality is kind of subjective in my opinion. What's high quality to me might be low quality to another instructor you have. For me, high quality really means that the children are actively engaged using as many of their senses as possible. So I am going to include a sensory chart for you that helps you look at that. But basically, that's what I'll be looking for. If you send me a lesson plan where the kids are not actively engaged and the teacher's doing more of the work, then I'll just, we'll just keep talking about that and work on that. And then, of course, these are professional documents for your portfolios, so they have to be well written and free of errors. So I hope that's good for now. You have also here another rubric. This will be the rubric I use when I score your final submissions later in the semester. But you can look at them now and start to understand what you should be including. So I hope that's helpful for now. And I want to go ahead and show you this example. So I have adapted a lesson plan template to try to help you. The one that was used in the past was really complicated unnecessarily, so this is adapted. So you'll put your name at the top and give your lesson a title. This is a science content area lesson. Again, as you've heard me say a million times, young children, their brains are not saying, I'm doing science now. In fact, young children are always, quote, doing science because that's all they do. But that's okay. For these purposes, we're going to call this science. So in context 1B, identify your students' backgrounds, needs, cultural differences, interests, and language proficiencies. So you can see here, we're doing a unit of study on cars. Children have had first-hand experience viewing real cars and documenting what they observed. The children have a variety of differences and needs. 9 are typically developing. 6 have disabilities. I personally don't like that word, but it is still used in the context of teaching documents like this. So here's your list, and 2 children are dual language learners. I actually will change this to multilingual because many of our children that come to us with with languages other than English, who are learning English, they actually usually speak many languages or hear many languages in their homes, which is important to be aware of, because the more languages that children are hearing and developing at the same time, the brain can do that. In fact, it's actually really good for the brain. However, it may mean the language develops in terms of expressive language a little more slowly. So your dual multi-language learners may not always be able to tell you everything they know. And that's going to be huge for your formative assessment. You're going to need to find ways that you can identify that will help you know what they're taking away from what you're teaching. All right, so grouping. How will the students be grouped for this lesson? I love that it starts out that it will be during centers. Thank you. That's all I need to hear. I chose centers because we'll be doing it for 2 weeks, and you can read the rest of it. This is perfect. This is an ideal, exemplary way of talking about what you're doing. Children will use cars and ramps to explore how force is needed for cars to move and that inclines can be used to increase speed. Very simple, right? We can all see this happening in our block area all the time. So that's great. The objectives must be student-centered and observable and measurable. So when you create your objectives, again, student-centered, observable, and measurable. All right, so push the cars down the ramps, experiment with different amounts of force, different ramp steepness. Given writing materials, children will document through pictures and writing their exploration with cars and ramps. These are all measurable, observable, and they're student-centered. So, for example, you may need, though, given writing materials, maybe some children may, as a modification, might need a camera to take a picture instead of writing or drawing about it. And then they can tell you about the picture. So there's an example there where you may need some modification to actually use those objectives and assess them. So these are from the Kentucky State Standards, and now you have an assessment. So here is the way the teacher will use formative assessment. A formative assessment is something that is a record of what children do, so that you're documenting what they do so that you can know what they might need, what you might need to build on, etc. So you can see here this student has created independently with full support. So basically you're just documenting what's happened here. What I tell teachers with formative assessment is that if you photograph what's happening in your classroom, you can use the photos to go back and fill this in, if you don't have time during the classroom period, because many times you don't. We are short-staffed in our schools and childcare facilities. So we have to be really creative about how we do formative assessments. And I encourage you to be creative. You can even make a note here, that I am going to use photographs of what children are doing to go back and create a formative assessment document. When you create your formative assessment, you need to figure out, how am I best going to record these behaviors so that I can learn from them about the children? That's really your big question. What assessment is going to help me most in thinking about using a document to reflect what children did? A formative assessment is not an assessment that's called summative. Summative is basically, can this child do this? Can this child do that? Those are really very different, and they're not what we're doing here. We are really reflecting what the children did so that we can think about it and know what we need to do next. So I just want to make sure that we are not trying to figure out if the child can count to 3. That's summative assessment. We're trying to figure out what the child did with the materials that we provided in the centers and lesson plan. All right, so any resources you need, you would put here. And then in your lesson procedures, you're going to just boom, boom, boom. And I will tell you, I'm kind of a pain in the about this part, because what I find is people, when they're creating lesson plans, really don't think through the level of detail they need to so that they can actually have a successful experience. I'm not trying to be the boss of the universe, I promise. I am trying to make sure you're thinking about every detail that needs attention. So this is sometimes the part where I really work with students, and I'll send you a list of questions if I see some gaps. And it might be me that's got the blind spot. I might send you the question and you say, I said this here, and you can show me. So fair enough. I definitely can use that kind of redirection myself at times. So you can see here, this is a long description of the activity, and you can see here the differentiation needed, so you can read through that. And then questions to encourage higher order thinking, encourage discussion, and then watch for. So these are specific indicators that you might decide to look for in your lesson plan. And again, this is definitely something where I'll be looking for modifications in particular. So I'm hoping this is going to be helpful for you. I'm just kind of going back over to make sure I've covered everything I want to. So I hope that this gives you enough without me going on and on and on all day. But I really wanted to try to be helpful about what I'm looking for here, and what the assignment requires. So be in touch with me. Remember, it's okay to submit. Do your best. Submit what you can, and we will work on it until you submit it at the end.